Good morning. Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to the fourth episode of Civic Cast, a podcast for engaged citizens exploring empathetic urbanism. We're coming at you live from Chattanooga, Tennessee. And with us this week, we have the illustrious Ashley Hand, who is the CIO, and that's the Chief Innovation Officer of Kansas City, Missouri. She did a lot of work in architecture and urban planning and transportation advocacy, and before becoming the first female CIO in the nation, and we're super lucky to have her this week. Thank you for joining us, Ashley.
Thanks so much.
Awesome. So the first question, for those of us who are not, for the listeners who are not super aware of the work you've done, who is Ashley Hand, and why is she the CIO of KCMO?
Well, I think above all, I would say I'm an urban advocate. I think I believe in cities and have tried to commit my career in various ways towards kind of the growth and advancement of our cities in a sustainable and equitable way. So I've lived and worked across the country and am a registered architect, and have done quite a bit of work in the planning field as well. But as Chief Innovation Officer for the City of Kansas City, Missouri, I focus very heavily on a couple areas. One is internal efficiency. How can we really leverage the resources and staff and capacity that we have to be much more effective in the work that we do? We increasingly move towards a more data-driven policy and decision-making structure, and we track our success through performance management. So how we can augment and continue to enhance the way we do our work is really important. So I work closely across departments to build innovation teams and identify specific processes and systems that require some closer look, I would say. We don't always do things perfectly, so it's a great way to hone in on something that needs to be done from either the customer perspective or even just an internal management, and work towards improving our efficiency there. And then on the external side, I really focus on how can we better engage our community. We have new tools available to us almost daily through technology and even offline methodologies, I think, that can be applied regularly in terms of how can we engage the community. And so we've done things like build new civic boards to engage different populations in the conversation about policy and governance in our city, as well as we were a former Code for America city, or I guess once a Code for America city, always a Code for America city. So we had a lot of really great energy last year in partnership with Kansas City, Kansas, as we looked at civic tech and what the potential was for that in terms of enhancing our community engagement strategies.
Awesome.
Do you want more?
So, great. So, I mean, one of the interesting things I think that maybe we can just cover as some background is KCMO is one of the Google Fiber cities. So, what does that mean exactly about your job, but what does that mean for the community as a whole?
Well, Kansas City, Kansas and Kansas City, Missouri were designated the first two Google Fiber cities, just as the mayor was taking office, and actually shortly after I arrived to Kansas City. So that was pretty exciting to have that announcement. But I think what really triggered a totally different discourse that I think most people on it did not anticipate. I mean, we kind of had a sense that this was going to be super fast internet, and that sounded really cool, and being first on the list always sounds really amazing, and everyone wants to be first in a very competitive market. But what we saw was it kind of lifted the curtain on a few things for us, particularly the digital divide within our community. We have always seen kind of geographic challenges when it comes to kind of more integrated communities and things like that. And when it comes to socioeconomic divides, there's literally an east-west divide in our city. And as the fiber hoods, which was Google's strategy for identifying neighborhoods that wanted fiber, went green, we would see that that east-west divide prevailed in our own community, as it was harder and harder for the lower socioeconomic groups to get people excited about what fiber meant for them. And so it really helped us focus in on this need to bridge that divide and figure out how we could take this great potential, this great opportunity, and make it accessible for everyone within our community, not just the folks that could afford it or were aware of it. And I think the mayor in Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas, so then Mayor Reardon and KCK and Mayor James, who's still mayor here in Kansas City, Missouri, put together a bi-state innovation team to really come up with a playbook of how we could make sure that as Google kind of was unfolding here, that we really work together as a community to figure out what this meant for us, because it's one thing to provide this infrastructure, it's another thing to figure out what to do with it. So that was definitely a huge opportunity. And while I probably have been less directly involved with Google itself in the specific implementation, certainly I see kind of the spin-off in terms of conversations about how do we effectively provide services and engage our community equitably. And I think that certainly is something that has come up very much just because of the advent of Google in Kansas City. I would also say, too, that I think the level of participation has changed. So when we were finding that those communities were not going green and not opting in to having Google Fiber put into their neighborhoods, we had grassroots mobilization to really change that, go door to door, find new ways of engaging people in the conversation and helping identify why this was valuable to them as well, whether it's access to healthcare information, government services, job applications, you name it. There's a lot of reasons why we wanted to make sure that people had access to the internet.
I think it's a really interesting question, especially now as more communities across the country are talking about becoming fiber cities. You see Google and a couple of other private providers making kind of more overtones about installing fiber and rolling that out as infrastructure. To me, it raises questions around the digital divide, around what communities maybe aren't in a position to take advantage of it. With the green fiberhood strategy that Google had for rolling out in Kansas City and now in other cities, are there communities that maybe are in a position to take advantage of that? And going forward, are they getting passed by? And what can cities, from an urbanist perspective, do about that?
I think we need to think about that with almost every service that's available. I mean, it's not just access to internet as a key opportunity, but when it comes to economic development and the potential for greater mobility in our communities, I think certainly we see that that's a really critical differentiator, and it certainly helps set people ahead of the pack by having that access. So I think when it comes to what we could do, so we as in the public sector in our kind of tower here at City Hall, the way that we were able to work most effectively was through public-private partnerships. So really identifying community members that are already in the communities that can help make these messages relevant, having the conversation with those stakeholders first to identify where the real value could be. And so that was something that I think was pretty impressive in the effort in Kansas City, was that they spread out very quickly to talk to as many people as possible to understand where the opportunities really would add value. And that's where we were able to kind of be more effective in going out with the message when the time came. And I think that's important when it comes to all aspects of major change in your urban environment, because the impact it has resonates differently for different stakeholder groups. And by understanding the voice of the customer and really understanding what the community is looking for, you're in a better position to make decisions that are more inclusive along the way. And I think that we worked really hard with that, and there's been some groups that have spun off as a result of these initial conversations to continue to sustain that conversation in our community. And I think now we're in that funny time when you start to move from ideas generation into implementation. So, ideation can be kind of this black hole sometimes, where you come up with tons and tons of ideas and don't really know what to do with them when it comes to actual taking action. And I think what we have seen is that those smaller groups are more agile and nimble and able to take those ideas and test and try them in our community, which is something that the public sector would not have been effective in doing.
So to further the transportation analogy a little bit, we talked about ideas of connectivity. There's also an idea of permeability, which is not just about where the connections are or the number of connections, but the quality of those connections, right? So you might have a superhighway and you might have kind of a dark alley. What kinds of questions can people on the city side who maybe are in discussions with companies or other infrastructure providers, what are some of the really critical questions or things from your playbook that you could do to proactively engage communities, some of the different stakeholder groups, or other places that people are getting on to really ensure that you address the quality of connections?
Well, I think so keeping the transportation analogy, I think it's the point of access is really important. So it's, you can provide a network of buses, you can provide a network of light rail, streetcar, you name it, but if people don't have the right entry points, they're not going to use it. And I think we see that in kind of the stratification in users that you see across different forms of public transportation across the country. I mean, there's definitely a gap there in terms of who uses what and how. And I think the opportunity we had with the arrival of fiber in our community was to really look at where that actually breaks things down in a new way. And it isn't just about creating the coolest gig capacity app, which is definitely a great opportunity, but it's also about changing public health and the conversation around public health in our community by creating new strategies for reaching into our public schools or into our community centers that for someone who might have to take a couple of buses to get down to a centralized service can now have access to that service because we have fiber to that community center, which now allows us to connect you directly with a healthcare professional who can provide initial screening, so you're not spending a ton of time getting down to a core service, but you're actually getting the information that you need early. It also changes the way that we look at issues of employment and providing opportunities for employment. And by providing that connectivity to what's out there and what's available, we also kind of turn the conversation to what are we doing to make sure that we're providing opportunity for our entire community to capture and build the skills that we have here locally. We have a really great entrepreneurial community in Kansas City, Missouri. We have incredible tech companies that are located here, but we're also, like many other communities, struggling to find the talent that we need to fill vacant positions. So this conversation also looked at how do we make sure that we're creating a pipeline and creating opportunity for our own community first by giving them the skills and access to the education that they need to prepare them for this future. And I think that really kind of created a new dialogue that while we knew that local talent was always going to be important to our economic development, it gave us another way of approaching it by putting a gig connection to our public schools. And now we can talk about all these programs that give kids real skills. We have hackathons all over the community because the conversation has been thriving. And so all of a sudden you've changed this paradigm, or it's the haves and have-nots to everybody has an opportunity. It's just making sure that that stop or that fiber connection is where you need it to be.
That's pretty interesting. Like the analogy that goes to in my relatively nerdy brain is like that almost you're enabling city services to function like an API on top of this city, this fiber layer, right, and reach into the deeper pockets of the community and dare I say it, meet people where they are almost.
Absolutely.
Geographically.
Mm-hmm.
Being in Chattanooga, we talk a lot about fiber. I want to switch gears a tiny bit because there was a statement that I think is very that you said that a lot of people say, but I want to hear maybe a concrete example of it, and that was a tweet you had where there, I think it was from the state of the city, Mayor Sly James said, there are opportunities to innovate without costing the city $1.
Absolutely.
And I know as a public servant, probably a lot of people like that, especially in the age of constrained budgets and everything. What is a really cool example of that you've seen as your time as a CIO in KCMO?
Well, one of the examples that we have, and it's still in pilot phase right now, but we know that there's entrepreneurs out there that have a really great proof of concept and would love to work with a government to, as their first client, to make that happen, to really, finish fleshing out their product and really understanding how it would work. But it's very difficult to navigate, and it doesn't work in terms of the traditional procurement model because we might not be asking people to provide this product or service to us. So what we've done is we've created a new partnership model that allows those entrepreneurs to come in and work with us, establish some basic measures for success, and also mitigate some of the risk that might be associated with using something untested. But by opening up our resources, our data, our personnel, and certainly some of the infrastructure or physical assets that we have access to, we're creating a new platform for that innovation that didn't exist otherwise. And it is a $0 budget. There's no funding for this. We rely very heavily on the strategic partnership that we know there's a value add to us as an organization to explore something we wouldn't have otherwise done through our traditional means. But we also know we're providing value to the entrepreneur by giving them a place to test and try something that they wouldn't have had to been able to do so easily before. So this is a really exciting experiment that we're working on right now, and we're still fleshing out how that really will work. And I'm a process person, so how can we make it as easy and painless as possible for everyone involved? But I think it's a great way of just simplifying something that we knew was probably happening already, but by allowing us to measure it and track its success, we have a better way of looking to the future and hopefully leveraging that up.
It's like RFP instead of P, meaning proposal. It's request for community partnerships almost. So it's
absolutely
shifting the dialogue away from like the what can you give me to how can we work together.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's really cool.
We'll be much more effective if we rely on the wealth of resources we have within our community instead of just limit it to City Hall and our teams here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of CivicCast. It's been really cool. I really like to hear from people actually inside of City Hall. I think you might be one of our second actual city employees. A lot of times we talk to people in this space, but it's always interesting to hear the change people are making from the inside.
It's a great time to work in government. There's a lot of opportunity here. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, Ashley Zehan, thanks again so much for joining us. This has been another episode of CivicCast, a podcast for engaged citizens, with your hosts Jason Denizak and Jeremiah Kimmelman. We bring you conversations with the brightest and most creative minds at the forefront of improving the urban experience in the 21st century. Each show, we really try to bring you fresh ideas in civic technology, creative innovation, and empathetic urbanism in 20 minutes or less. Any feedback, we value it. Please tweet us at CivicCast or watch online at civiccast.us, or you can subscribe on iTunes, YouTube, or Stitcher Radio. Thanks so much.